Always good to make sure I'm recording before that as well, just in case. So here we go.
Good luck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lat Mackey, and this is Sequence Break, a podcast that features conversation with speedrunners, developers, content creators, and everything in between. And Bismuth, I think you hit all of those.
Yeah, probably.
Thanks so much for joining. This is episode 77, and I'm almost wondering where to even start with this. But I did get that. Let's see, you're a speedrunner of tassing and RTA, if I remember correctly. Let's see.
Well, the tasking a little bit less, but mostly RTA. Yeah.
Mostly RTA. Okay, there we go. Content creation, where I probably became familiar with you. Speedrun Explained and the history of videos. Awesome stuff on YouTube. And then recently, you've been placing a whole bunch of bananas as a developer. Am I accurate with that?
Yeah, yeah, that's true as well.
I really wanted to actually ask about that because I was watching your stream the last couple times you've streamed, and I'm like, there's a lot of banana placement. What the heck is going on with all that?
Yeah, it's lately I've been working on a future feature of the Donkey Kong 64 randomizer, where basically the game has normally 3,500 bananas. But with the randomizer, we want to randomize their locations, but we don't want them to be in like really bad or awkward spots. So they're like hand-picked locations. So I spent something like 150 hours over like the last year placing about 7,000 custom banana locations. Well, not locations because it's like a banana bunch counts for 5 bananas, but basically 7,000 more bananas that creates a pool that the randomizer can draw from to basically give you a random distribution of bananas. And now it's more like a testing phase and making sure everything's correct and there are no typos in the coordinates. So I've been streaming a lot of that lately, but it's been a lot of tedious work, but it's finally starting to pay off and it's really interesting.
I'm glad to hear that. And it's actually, I'll tell you what, because I do want to ask about the randomizer, but let's chat a little first about kind of like your history with gaming. Like, when did you get your start? What were like some of the first early games that you played as a kid that maybe got you hooked on video games?
Well, it started before I even remember about it. There's a picture of me taken with like a Polaroid. It's the I'm playing Super Mario Brothers 3 and I'm about 2 years old. So it started really, really young. And I was actually pretty good at games even like from a young age. Um, I remember when I was 4 or 5, before we had the N64, so that was 97 roughly. Um, we had the NES. And so I played the NES. I played Super Mario Brothers 1, 3. We had a power pad, the like sort of DDR pad that you can press numbers to play like world class track meet, and we had Athletic World, which was like a 1 player game with 5 levels, and we'd play that with my brother and my cousin, like alternating who gets to play which level. We always had like our own level. I had level 3, and so I played like a lot of NES games growing up, and then Christmas '99 we got the Donkey Kong 64, Nintendo 64 package. And then it was Super Mario 64, Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye eventually. I did get GoldenEye later, but DK64, Mario Party 3. I had only 6 games on N64, so I played a lot of each of them. I played them all for many hours. So that's basically how I started gaming, and yeah. So as soon as I could hold a controller, I was doing it.
It's funny how that kind of lock-in that comes up quite a bit, and probably in my own history as well, where you only could play the games you had. So, I mean, that's almost, dare I say, like training or like setting the seed for what speedrunning kind of is. Where you're going to play the game multiple times. It's kind of interesting that, if you only have a set amount of games, that's what you're playing, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's actually how I started as well. It started through DK64 mostly. My dad was, well, he still is a programmer, and he often worked from home. Um, not necessarily like during work hours, but just I don't know. He was often like programming at home, and oftentimes he just needed like a half an hour break just to clear his head, and he would play DK64. And over the like months and years, he actually beat the games probably like 8 to 12 times, I would say. And so he got to know the game a lot, and he got like 101%. He always got 101%.
Hmm.
And he started to get like times in the 15-hour range. And I was like 9, 10 years old or so, and I saw his completion time as a challenge for me to beat. And so eventually his best time was 13 hours, 42 minutes. And so I set myself the goal to try to beat that. And that's basically how I started speedrunning. And I got into it that way and started like on my own. And eventually through the internet, I found like the websites for GoldenEye, for Mario Kart 64, for Super Mario 64. And then I submitted times for like Princess Secret Slide and stuff like that.
That's so interesting for you to mention that, because quite often we'll hear there'll be this crossover between folks who code or program and actually speedrun as well. But you're the first person I've heard whose dad actually kind of inspired you to do that. That's so interesting that you had that in the house, and there was already a little bit. I mean, one of the things about speedrunning is, for a lot of us, it's individual, the competitions or the competition with others. So there's already that little seed planted there about,
Yeah,
I
it
got
was
to
sort
beat
of
that time.
one-sided competition because my dad wasn't speedrunning; he was just like
Got it.
playing the game, and because he knew it so well, he was able to play through it fairly efficiently. But I just set myself the goal to try to beat his time. But yeah, it started through that sort of set myself a goal to try to beat. But as a kid, I was always like very fascinated about math and numbers and also records like world records and fastest times and whatever. When I was 3 years old, I would set a time on the microwave because it has a setting where you could just set a timer. And I would set like 10 seconds per lap, and I would do laps around the house. So I would set like 40 seconds, try to do 4 laps before the timer expired. So I would
Speed.
do that at 3 years old. So I think I was basically set up for speedrunning.
Speedrunning IRL at 3 years old.
Yeah.
And you can't even submit those times. That's so interesting. Okay, so you
I
mentioned
wonder
it,
what the world record is for laps around the house.
yes, exactly. That's so awesome. Okay, you mentioned something that I think it's honestly one of the reasons I think that I even started trying to ask people if they would join me on the podcast is kind of this history of speedrunning. And you mentioned, finding sites for GoldenEye and all these other N64 games. Around what time is this, and what kind of information or communities are there out there at this time?
I think the first one I found was in 2004, and it was the SM64 page that was on Curtis Bright's university. Like he was at University of Waterloo, and they had like their own student page, and he used his to host SM64 info and challenges and stuff. And he had the page for like the Princess Secret Slide best times, Koopa the quick races with the shell, without the shell, with like the cannon, or with whatever like different restrictions. Also the Princess Secret Slide with like all the coins, or like without the shortcut or whatever. So he had like 9 or 10 of those in total. And I was interested in especially like the Princess Secret Slide, and I actually eventually tied the record back then. My name was up there for a little bit in 2004, 2005. Eventually, it was beaten by I think it was Miles Buckram who did it. We got a 12.3, but at the time the record was 12.4 and was held by a handful of people, of which I was. I wish I was part of. It's like me and a bunch of like legendary names like Alex Penev, Curtis Bright, Miles Buckram, uh, someone else I can't remember, but yeah, a bunch of people from the mid 2000s.
I'm curious, like how this information kind of gets shared, because this is before YouTube. This is before any sort of. Is anybody? I can't imagine anybody streaming at this time. How did you all like? Even just describe what exactly the
Um,
slide was?
well, the thing with the slide specifically is there actually was a video of it. It was hosted on the page. You could download it
Oh, that's
and
cool.
watch it. Usually there were like 20 seconds videos. So,
Right.
and with like, quality of the time, recorded like a VHS recorder or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, videos existed. They were
Okay.
just pretty rare to find. But that's how I saw this strategy, and I could try to beat it. And yeah, finding the websites, at least search engines did exist, so that's
Okay.
basically how I probably found it.
Just keep.
But yeah, it was a interesting era for sure.
What's the thing that, I mean, when does this become a little bit more, I guess, formalized? Because right now it sounds like it's just on one page and stuff. And I tend to think about SDA as kind of when things started to, gather together. But I don't know, was there anything that you used or before then, or might have been a precursor to something like that?
Well, it was really more localized per game.
Mm.
So, you had the Elite for GoldenEye, you had MK64 players page, you had the Curtis Bright's website for SM64. All of those sites actually are still online, with varying degrees of like still being a community. I guess Curtis Bright's page never really was a community per se, but the other ones are still communities that are alive and thriving. Um, but yeah, back in the days, I think people used IRC a lot. I didn't. I had Curtis Bright on MSN, MSN Messenger. And yeah, I mean, back then, I wasn't really involved in the community much.
Yeah.
I was really young too. I was like 11 or 12 when I
Oh,
submitted
wow.
my
Not even a teenager yet.
SM64 Princess Secret Slide Time. I really started interacting with the community more, a little bit more in 2009 when I started posting on SDA forums,
Mm.
and a lot more in 2012 when I discovered speedrunning on Twitch and Speedruns Live. But before that, it was more like I was watching TASes and I was watching speedruns and I was like playing DK64, sort of speedrunning it on my own and doing like a bit of casual GoldenEye speedruns. But like my times were all garbage, but I was just doing it for myself. So
No,
that's basically how I was speedrunning before like 2012 mostly.
interesting. And did you ever get a chance or did you ever end up submitting any of your runs to SDA at the time or anything like that?
I wanted to in 2009, I think it was. Yeah. I got serious about it in 2009. There was a 101 speedrun of DK64 by Joe Evil in 9 hours and 2 minutes. Submitted in 2006, and I had seen it and I thought I could beat it. So I followed the exact same route because I was lazy, I guess. And
Got to start somewhere.
and I was trying to beat it, and I was like, it was a segmented run, so you just like play one level in one segment, and then the next segment would be another level. And so I had another save file that I would just go through the route once, do the level with that route, and then that was my practice run, and I would do it on the other save file. So I was doing one practice run and then one directly on my attempt. And I was actually like 20 minutes ahead of the record. Out of Galleon, which is the level 4, it was like something like 2.5 hours instead of like 250. And I was like, oh, I'm like on pace to beat it. And then I went to the forums to talk about it. And then that's when I found in a thread that this wasn't the world record. It was just like the current SDA run from like 3.5 years before. But some dude named Sea Fox had like a 7:30. And it was like, what? How am I expected to beat this by an hour and a half? There's no way. So I sort of like got demoralized at that point, and
Yeah.
I sort of left out my the rest of my attempt at beating that segmented run. I was also in college in a college dorm where I had to play in like the like common living room, so it was
Oh,
kind of a weird environment.
yeah.
And one of my segments got derailed when a really annoying like sort of like supervisor-ish type of person who's like just like walking around, and it was like I don't know 9 or 10 p.m. and she was like, no, you can't play anymore. I was like, no, what, why? I'm like 18, what are you doing? So yeah, basically that attempt got derailed and I never finished it. But yeah,
But
essentially that's before I started really like getting involved with the community. That's all like the sort of stuff I was doing, more like stuff on my own, watching tasks, watching speedruns on YouTube, and yeah,
IRL RNG is the worst. That's the moral of
yeah.
that story. Jeez. Well, okay, so that's super interesting, and I think that's that was kind of my experience. I see speedrun SRC was not around when I first started watching. It was all SDA, but I wasn't speedrunning at the time. I was just a fan, that kind of thing. And I always find it kind of interesting, the process that had to go on, and the SDA kind of seemed like there was this place that helped us share information a little bit better in a little more centralized location than it had been up to that point. I was looking at some of your PBs, and the one that's actually being showed on screen right now is, according to Twitch, it says it's like 9 years ago or something. So I'm curious, were you streaming your attempts or at some point do you start streaming attempts or recording them to share with an audience? Because 9 years ago, I don't remember when Twitch came around. So the fact something like that still exists, I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, well, I started in 2012. I know Twitch, like Justin.tv was around like 2009, but I didn't know about it. Someone showed me, it was ZFG doing any percent speedrun of Ocarina of Time in December of 2011. I think it was during like the holiday period. And yeah, he was doing any percent runs, which at the time were, um, it was it Ganonless? Yeah, I think it was Ganonless speedruns. So wrong warps had been found and were used in the run, but not the Ganon door. Because I actually have a story about Ganondorf.
Yeah.
So that's like when I first saw it, and then about maybe 2 weeks later, I found Siglemic's stream
Hmm.
doing SM64. He was like already one of the most popular ones on Twitch, but he wasn't like the massive stream he was in the later in 2012 when he was regularly pulling like 15,000 viewers and like Twitch front page and everything. Um, but yeah, that's basically then I found out like there were speedruns live on Twitch, and then just about a month later, I started doing races on Speedruns Live in February 2012. And so that's when I created my Twitch account and started streaming. And so the first race I did was in Minecraft, because at the time, Minecraft was pretty big, pretty new.
Yeah.
He had like a new Ender Dragon to like beat the game, but the races were just entering the Nether. So you would just like spawn in the world, try to find obsidian, and build a Nether portal and enter the Nether. And so the first race I did was with Sockfolder, and he showed me actually how to like speedrun that and reach the Nether faster. And I was like, oh, nice. And we raced together like, I don't know, 15, 20 times over the next month. I got a lot better and it was a lot of fun racing with him. And then all of a sudden, I find that this guy, Sockfolder, found a major game breaking glitch in Ocarina of Time just two months later in April 2012. That's when Sockfolder and, what's his name? Rob Dog found the Ganondorf in OOT. That's when it was found, and so that's when I realized that this guy had been racing Minecraft with was like a huge glitch and setup
Yeah. Good.
finder that was like instrumental in like 5 different games: OOT, SMB1, SM64 with the Canonless setup. Like a bunch of setups and glitches were found by Sockholder.
I I'm always fascinated by folks who are dedicating themselves to finding those type of things, because I think my speedrunning sounds a bit more like yours, whereas I typically will start with somebody else's route. A lot of times I play games that nobody else plays, so I'll use a task route or something like that. and my respect level, it's fascinating to me, those who can put themselves through just throwing yourself at things over and over again to find some of these game breaking glitches. And I wasn't around when Ganondorf was found, and I got to imagine that was pretty wild to see something like the game broken that way, because that one was that's a pretty big one.
Yeah, it was. It was like it was a gold race at the time. Like in the in the next like week or two after the trick was found, it was just crazy. Everyone was doing runs. I was doing runs. uh, Everybody tried it, and so that was a pretty crazy time for Ocarina of Time. Yeah.
I can only imagine. It's probably one of the things that got me onto Twitch in the first place was Ocarina of Time. So many folks. It seemed like there was always tons of people playing at that time, whether you wanted to watch live or as a VOD. And I've had a few individuals on to talk about it because it's pretty much my favorite game of all time. And it seems like it's one of those things that can be a gateway, like especially around that time period. If you started watching or getting into speedruns like that mid 2010s, early 2010s, it was SM64 and Ocarina of Time were
Yeah,
some of the
those
biggest
were
games.
the big two. Yeah,
So
definitely.
So any like attempts of your own or PBs that stick out during that time period too? That ones like you kind of remember like having a good run or anything like that?
Well, basically at that time when I started streaming, I was doing those Minecraft races, and I was also learning Turok 2 speedrunning. That game is really fun. It's a good speedrun, but the original PC port was really unstable, especially on like Windows 7 and later. And so I had a lot of crashes in later missions and stuff. So I was just playing through the first three missions because those were also my favorite and the ones I knew best. So I was doing a lot of first three missions in Turok, which was just like a made up category of my own that I ran in. But I was like consistently getting like a minute faster than the segmented run that existed, which like I thought was pretty cool. But so that was really fun. But in Minecraft, I started doing actual any% speed runs. So I communicated with a few people on SDA forums who had figured out basically a route and an idea of a run. They had a lot of work put into finding a good seed to beat the game faster and like have everything you needed to beat the game. And basically, it was using a glitch where if you drop items and you quickly leave the world, you can come back, and the state of the items on the ground was saved, so they're on the ground, but they haven't been saved in your inventory, so they still exist in your inventory. So you can duplicate items that way. So that was like a huge instrumental glitch in the run. And tried it out, and I sort of became the first any% set seed speedrunner that way. And over the next year, I refined that time and I got it down from like 35, 40 minutes the first couple of runs to 18 minutes, 17 minutes, and then started counting real time and whatever. And so the time got to 16 minutes something. And then I submitted that to AGDQ because AGDQ was a thing I discovered in 2013. I just barely missed the one in 2012 because I was like, sort of finding about Twitch speedrunning, and I just missed it.
Yeah.
But the one in 2013 I watched with a lot of interest. I watched like probably at least a third of it live, like 8 hours a day probably. Um, and so I was really, really interested in the basically that's how I found out about a lot of speedrunners and a lot of people followed, and that like really like broadened my scope and my interest, and started watching a lot of people and meet a lot of people. That's how I found about like Runner Guys, Nernicus, people who are like still good friends to me today. And so that was great. And I submitted for the next AGDQ, and in 2014, I was picked, the Minecraft any% run. And I traveled to AGDQ, drove there, nice 12-hour drive. And the week was incredible, amazing. I couldn't believe I was at Awesome Games on Quick. And on the Saturday was my run towards the end of the event, just before ZFG doing OT. I don't remember which category, but no, sorry, it was no, I messed that up. It was Narcissa doing Wind Waker. I was before that run, if I recall correctly. Now I'm no longer sure. It was 8 years ago. Uh,
But at that
um,
point, some really people who were streaming quite a bit to some pretty big
yeah, yeah,
numbers,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was like the prime time
Yeah.
moment of the marathon. It was a Saturday. It was like Saturday afternoon. It was like incredible. It was
Oh
actually
man.
the peak viewership for HDQ at that in 2014 was
Oh,
during my run.
no
And so it
pressure.
was like all the eyes were on me, and I had to do this run, which was really RNG reliant and uh, yeah, it was a bit of a stressful one. I gave an estimate of, I think it was 30 minutes, and they bumped it up to 35 because at the time it was including setup as well. And
Yep.
I was like, oh, it's a PC run, it might be a little longer. Anyway, I had an estimate of 35 minutes. And the run ended up taking 16 something, 17 minutes or so in real time, and 15 minutes in game time. And that was a new record. It was still a fairly weak world record. It
Sure.
was basically uncontested still at the time, even though I had been running for over a year. I was still pretty much alone. It was like, relatively weak. Could definitely improve by at least a minute, but it was also a pretty RNG reliant run. But yeah, it was like my Ender Dragon fight was like the best I had in best I had ever probably up to that point. And that was like a pretty crazy run. And the most memorable moment was at the very end. So I had been taking damage. I think I was on fire probably. And I had 2.5 hearts left of health. And to travel quickly to the portal, which was like hovering in midair, you don't want to like build up blocks to it. You want to throw an ender pearl, which teleports you directly on the portal. And then you sort of throw it on the portal and you fall in, and that's how you finish. That's like seconds faster. But to do that, when you teleport, you take 2.5 hearts of damage, and I had 2.5 hearts of health. So I had to heal first, and I had golden apples for healing, and I ate one, but I was a little too nervous, and you have to hold it for like, I don't know, a second and a half, 2 seconds before you start actually eating, or like before you finish eating and it actually starts taking effect. And I held it for like, I don't know, a fraction of a second too short, and I didn't finish eating. So when I threw my pearl, I died.
Oh no.
But as I died, I still fell in the portal and beat the game. So I beat the game while dead, which I didn't know was even
Yeah, I
possible.
didn't know it was a thing.
So yeah, that was like an absolutely crazy ending, and it turned out to actually also be a world record run. And so that got a lot of people interested in Minecraft speedrunning. I believe that kickstarted Minecraft speedrunning because like a community formed like in the weeks following. My record was beaten within the month, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was a really crazy time, and a lot of people actually still remember that run. And I still get a lot of people saying like, "Oh, I didn't even know that was you doing that Minecraft run. I watched that like 8 years ago. I was like, oh, that's insane. I'd
Yeah.
never seen a speedrun of Minecraft." And yeah, so that was probably my most memorable, my most memorable RTS speedrun.
What an experience. I used to host a show for GDQ, and I was trying to track like the history of like PC gaming at the marathon, because early on, these first few years, there wasn't a ton of it. And
Mhm.
this had to have been the first Minecraft run, right? At
Yeah, yeah,
GDQ.
yeah.
Okay. Because
Yeah,
so
the it was basically the first Minecraft run ever, almost. I was the only one doing it, really. There was like one or two random seeds runs on YouTube, which were like 2 hours long or so.
yeah.
But it was like Minecraft speedrunning did not really take off until at least 2014, 2015.
That's super interesting too, because my memory's a little foggy here, but I kind of remember Minecraft being pretty big right out of the gate. Like that game kind of found an
Mhm.
audience pretty quick. So many
Yeah.
people wanted to see the game, but I'm sure had never seen it played like that before ever. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so many people just didn't even know there was an ending to
Right.
Minecraft. Like, people are
Yeah.
like, "Why would you speedrun Minecraft? It's like the dumbest idea ever. There's no end." But there is an end. There's a dragon, there's a final boss, there's a portal, there's a like the when you do it, when you beat it, there's the credits at the end. It's like there's an ending. But people didn't even know that. The ending had been added in, I think it was November 2011, something like that.
That's
Um,
That
so
that
yeah.
is so cool. I think also too that it comes up so often time and time again how like GDQ seems to be, speaking of portal, like this gateway that is sometimes opens people up to what a speedrun is, speedrunning. Even to this day, I still meet people who just AGDQ 2019 or whatever was like the first time I saw a speedrun. Like it seems to still be a thing. It's not the only thing nowadays, but it seems to be a thing that is a gateway for people to find speed running, and especially if it's a game that's they enjoy, so
Yeah, I think between 2014 and 2017, 18 were like the golden days of AGDQ being the gateway to people.
That was me, 2014. I was like, what is this? Mind blown, So cool. Oh my gosh. Okay. So that's so great. And what a great memory. I mean, that's how do you top that? That's your first run ever at a live speedrunning event.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. I would say though, maybe my the one moment I had even more fun in was doing the Mario Maker race with, and it was the very first one in 2016. Mario Maker 1 had just come out a few months prior, and it was the relay race, 2 teams, 4 players on each team. And I really was a nobody in there because it was a bunch of legendary Mario runners. It was Dram, it was Trihex, it was the Mexican runner, it was Link Dead. They had Andy. I don't remember exactly everyone, but we're like, both teams are really, really stacked. And then there was this guy. Who is this guy? He's a Donkey Kong 64 speedrunner, and he says, I'm just pretty good at Mario, I guess. I've never really speedrun any 2D Mario games before. I did Super Mario Brothers 1 a little bit, but that was after actually Mario Maker. So I wasn't a Mario speedrunner at all. And I was just like, I think I'm pretty good at Mario Maker. I think I could be a good addition to the teams. I was just sort of like added towards the end, last minute. There was there's like a spot actually you could take, yeah. And I actually ended up like really, really pulling my own weight and holding up my own, and we actually crushed the other team in that race. But the doing that was incredible because you're playing levels you've never seen. The levels are really good because they're designed to be played this way in this exact setting. And you've got a crowd of like 400 people just cheering everything. And you've got like 150, 200,000 people watching right now as you're playing. So it was like incredibly stressful, but a good kind of stress that really pushes you to clutch things out and like pull it off on the first try as you've never seen things before. You're just like super focused. It was really, really incredible. And so, yeah, that was probably actually my most fun at GDQ, but it wasn't really a speedrun per se.
I know our speedrunning community is not it's relatively small compared to other things out there and stuff like that. But I was watching this live at home, and for a moment, it felt like the whole internet was watching people play Mario at a really high level during this. I don't know if that actually was the case, but it felt like that. And you're right. There were so many legends, to say the least, playing the game at that point on those couches. And I got to be honest, I didn't put it together until a little bit later, a few years later, when I started watching some of your YouTube content, that was you as part of this. With all due respect, because I was like, I hadn't seen you stream a lot of Mario at the time, so I was one of those people.
I was not a Mario speedrunner at all. It was pretty crazy. I even got a spot in that race.
So cool, and I think you're right. Seeing those levels, and I wasn't watching a ton of Mario Maker at the time. I definitely was a big fan of Mitch at the time, watching SMB3 and some of these other folks watching Andrew G, SMB1, all those kind of, so the more like 8-bit and 16-bit Marios. But the seeing this and like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people created this, in just a game. It was the levels, the level of play, all of the folks who were doing it. It was. I agree with you. It was, as a fan, it was a great time to be a fan and watch some of that. It was pretty awesome. So yeah, I guess
I've been on the fan side of watching these races, and it's really such a fun event to watch and cheer for one team or the other.
They really are great. They still do. I mean, the Mario folks still put together these amazing, and not just Mario anymore. Now we get great Zelda, Mega Man. I mean, we got so many different types of games and relay races and stuff that I'm glad GDQ still provides an opportunity for stuff like that. It's the only stuff you can do like in an in-person event. So
yeah.
Okay, so question for you then. So when do you start thinking about or how do you start creating content that isn't, you actually playing a game? It's actually, Speedrun Explained something. Tell us a little bit about the history and how that comes to be.
It started, well, I actually have, I don't know where it is right now, but I think I have a screenshot of a Discord message when I say, I might want to try doing a video that explains the Mario 1 speedrun. Basically, the reasoning behind is that the SMB1 world record is the one speedrun that always goes viral whenever there's a new
Right.
record.
Yes.
Like when it was Andrew G, when it was Darbian getting the first 456. Like every time it happened, it was always going to go everywhere. All the articles were being written about it. You always saw it in like news outlets that you really thought had no business talking about speedrunning. And then obviously it would pop up on Facebook. It would be everywhere.
Be
And
everywhere.
the comments were always exactly the same. When it's not something like, "Oh, you're wasting your life, get a life, loser." It's always something like, "Why didn't he die on the plants? He's clearly cheating. Like, look, he goes through the plants. He should be dead." Or like he walked on one block gaps, or
Oh, right.
really dumb stuff that but it was always stuff like that, and people didn't appreciate the skill behind, because they were saw whatever thing they didn't understand, they immediately dismissed it as being cheated, hacked, run, whatever bullshit.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
so I was like, okay, I want to make people appreciate the speedrun for what it is, and how skillful it is, and how interesting it is. And basically, I want to just do it so the run plays, and whenever there's something that the viewer doesn't understand, pause the run and explain what just happened, what's going on. And so I had this idea. I was like, oh, maybe I should do that. And at the time, I was working at a recycling center, and during the day, it was in the winter, so not a lot of people coming in. I was working like 3 days a week, 3 days a week at the time, and so during the day at work, I had some time, so I decided to type up a script. And in that weekend, because I was working weekends, I wrote the entire script for my first video in just like, I don't know, 8 hours or so, over 2, 3 days of while I was between clients.
Yeah.
And so I wrote the whole thing. I was like, oh, I got a script. I think I can do this. And then I started recording with my headset microphone. The quality was absolutely horrible. A friend of mine listened to it and said, "You should try using your phone instead." So I used my phone in my bedroom, because it was the quietest room in the house. My phone was on the bed, and I was just standing and reading my script, and I recorded that way for probably 2 or 3 days. Um, and after that was done, I had all the audio. I had, and so yeah, I had all the audio, and I was like, okay, at this point, I need to start video editing. Let's look up a video editing tool. We should probably get working on that. So I found a video editing tool, and I started editing. And within 10 days after that, the video was out. So I was working 3 days a week. So I had 4 days where I could do this. I would just do it all day, every day. And I finished it really, really quickly. And I sent it out. At the time, I knew, like, I was talking about SMB1, and also it was right around the time that Summoning Salt was starting to like
Mm,
pull like million views.
right.
And I was like, I think, honestly, I think this might have potential to reach 1 million views. So I
Wow.
tried to, like, have people like be interested in it, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, because I didn't have 1,000 subscribers for
Oh.
monetization options.
Hmm.
Um, and so I announced it like a week before and whatever. And when I released it, initially it, did fine, got a few thousand views. But then after a week or two, it just like went up and up and up and up and up, and just would never stop going up. And
Still going up today,
it
actually.
was insane.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, actually, it went up to over 8 million views. That was the first video I made. When I look back to it, I can't stand it. I can't watch it anymore. It's so bad. The sound quality is terrible. I did zero like noise cancellation or
Right.
equalizing or anything, and I have yellow text all over the place. Like disgusting, like maxed out sliders, like 255 colors on the RGB scale, which are like horrible for the bitrate and for the eyes. So yeah, it's still to this day my most popular video, but that's basically how I started. Just had an idea and then I did it, and somehow I pulled it off within 2 weeks. I had it completely finished and it just took off massively.
This is just my feelings about it, but it's one of the first things I think I ever saw that I saw associated with you. And the reason I think it resonates is because you're breaking it down in a way that I can understand and that we can understand. Now, at the time, I was speedrunning, so I understood everything you were talking about. But even then, I felt like I was getting something out of it. So I know, I'm sure as a video editor yourself, you're probably looking at I want to change this is that. That's all those kind of things. But I got to tell you, as like somebody who's watching it, it was just, this info is really interesting and I'm really into it. And I'm somebody who knew about speedrunning. So the info in there was just quite good. So, and I got to say, your first one to be 8 million, that's your first video ever. I mean, at that point, just quit, right? Just be done. No, I don't know. Where do you go from there? How do you think, how do you continue on?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge to try to get this spark again.
Yeah.
Like the second video I did was a follow up because 455 had been achieved, and at the time it was looked at probably the last second break because the 454
All right.
time saves were looking probably humanly impossible at the time. But then like a lot of setups with a lot of like tech was found that made everything more doable. Um, but anyway, the follow up video I did still got 7 million views, and then like other videos I made like have gathered a lot of views, but nothing like has been just as big
Right.
as that first one that just completely exploded.
That is an interesting question. I noticed on your profile that you have done some SMB1 speedrunning yourself. At the time, had you done any of the SMB speedrunning, or was there anybody like how are you compiling all of the information? Because I think that's, like I said, I mentioned that's like one of the things that's really interesting about it is that the what you're talking about is really, it's broken down quite in a great way that we can easily understand. So how are you gathering and putting all that info together?
Well, SMB1 was a bit of a special case because I knew of Andrew G since 2007, I want to say.
Wow.
Because his speedruns were the sort of ones that went viral on YouTube back
Right.
then, and so I had seen them. I knew about it. I knew about like the wall jumps and stuff for like many years, and then when Darbian started going really big, in I think it was 2016, then I started watching his stream a lot. He was doing a lot of SMB1 runs. He beat Andrew G's record, got a like lower 457, and then like Sock Folder came along, find the flagpole glitch setup, and then 456 started happening. So I was there all along. I saw all of those runs happen live. Maybe not all of them, but I saw many of them happen live. I was watching those streams like daily. I was really watching a lot of SMB1. So that was 2016, 2 years before. So I just like absorbed a lot of knowledge because I've always been one to want to know how something works. When you see a glitch, I've been one to always try to figure out why, or usually I'm not the one figuring it out why, but I ask around basically. I want to know. And so I already knew all of that information basically when I made the video. I could just write the script and that was done. Um, but in other games, sometimes usually I just come in with a varying amount of knowledge. Like DK64, my knowledge was already pretty good. Zelda 1, my knowledge was not so great because I had seen like a lot of Lag Attack streams. I had watched some of his Zelda 1 runs, but initially I followed him for his Super Mario RPG runs, and I wasn't really interested in Zelda 1 because I had never played it. So like Zelda 1, I didn't have that much information going in. And so yeah, it's been a challenge sometimes to just come in with little knowledge about the run and try to come out with the most comprehensive information you can have on the speed run that exists. So there's been a lot of long conversations of me asking a million questions to group of people or sometimes just one person who's really, really helpful. The other one was Fiskbit. Fiskbit was incredible, very, very instrumental in making me understand everything about screen scrolling, about the enemies, about like the manipulations, about like everything I needed to know. Fiskbit was amazing. Um, and so, yeah, basically it's me setting up a group chat with some people and asking a million questions, and people are really, really, really helpful in the speedrunning community. And I basically never ran into anyone who wasn't willing to like spend hours just explaining all this stuff to me.
It probably shouldn't be surprising at this point that most of us that speed run like one game or are passionate about one game, we could probably talk forever about it. You know,
Yeah.
probably not that surprising. Some of my favorite videos that you do are actually explaining different tasks. I can remember the DK64 one and the Mario 64. And you explain kind of like how the task is broken down. And as a geek, I've actually gone in, I'll go to taskvideos.org and check the notes and all that kind of stuff. But I don't see a lot of, and even to this day, I still don't see a ton of like video content about this explaining how tool-assisted speedruns work. What was kind of your start, and when did you get into that? And why did you choose to do those? Because as a viewer, super thankful for them, but it's not always easy to break down what people can do with the tools as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, the first task I saw was SMB3 in, I think it was 2005. And I'm pretty sure it was on Google Videos because YouTube wasn't a thing back then. Google Videos, I think, existed just a year before YouTube existed. And it was the Morimoto task, like a 1050 or so.
Yes.
One of the most
Morimoto.
legendary tasks.
Yeah.
I think the task is from 2003, but I think I saw it in 2005. So that's the first task I saw. And then I saw some of the SM64 stuff that was being done. And eventually in 2007, the 120 star by Riku in 137, which has now been beaten by RTA. But yeah, this was my first like exposure. And then I got a lot into SM64 tasking because there was a lot of taskers putting just like individual stars or like free runs or whatever, like challenges and whatever tasking. And so that was around 2007, 2008. People like Bob Mario 511, Silent Slayers. Like I had subscribed to them. I watched like everything they put out. So I was really into tasking like from very early on before I knew about task videos. So I've always thought tasks were amazing and they're really, really impressive to watch, and they're also really fascinating to create. So I think whenever I think about one game I'd like to cover, I always ask, would I rather want to do the world record or to do the task?
Yeah.
There's a trade-off because the world record has a more like human story to it. They're going to be mistakes. They're going to be like ups and downs in the runs. They're going to be stuff to break down about like the strategy and the state of mind and what's going on. Like I'm thinking mostly about the Zelda 1 run in that regard. Like I had a lot of fun breaking down Lack Attack strategy because I find the evolving route and strategy with like the enemy counting and whatever, all the drops and stuff is incredibly impressive and fascinating. So I had a lot of fun with that, which is not necessarily something that's as interesting when you're doing a task. But then in a game where the task is pulling off like absolutely crazy strats that you absolutely have to break down and explain because it's so insane.
Mind-breaking.
Like mode door skip in SM64 has so many layers to it, and like it's down to like when Mario is millions of units away, the float precision becomes coarse because he's so far that he can only move by like point like 1/8 of a unit, but he has to move within like 1 unit. So the float coarseness actually is a problem when you're going that fast. So stuff like that is just too crazy to not talk about. Like when I was told that the reason why just before the PU movement, when Mario's like going into the waterfall, they spam the R button to like go into fixed mode, lakitu mode, back and forth a few times. The reason why they did that is they brute forced it so that the camera would be in a position that allowed this movement to work, because control stick inputs are only limited by like 128 by 128 square, and it's not precise enough to like move Mario in a way that where he ends up in that gap, like in that out of bounds gap next to the door that they needed to get into. And so they had to brute force a camera movement that made it so there were a set of possible stick inputs that allowed this to happen. But for that, they had to like have the camera being ever so slightly off so that this stick movement puts Mario like a fraction of a unit further to the left. And so that kind of stuff is just like too incredible not to talk about. So when I when I go in a game and I'm like, I need to explain this game, I always ask myself, is the like human story and the whatever is going on in the world record more interesting, or is the task doing like the more interesting crazy stuff? So I sort of choose which one I do from there.
That's actually, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's actually a great point, and it's one of the things I've had taskers on the podcast as well, and they talk about the time consuming process of any task that at world class level, as we say, because some videos do actually get rejected, on taskvideos.org and things like that. Excuse me, because they're judged not submitted like fastest time or whatever. And so I really appreciate that you highlight that process, because you're right there. Just imagine what it took to get that float plane perfect. I don't even know what it was. I can't imagine months. Sometimes these things take months. I mean, some of these take years. I mean, these tasks is forever sometimes.
The current SM64 120 star task has been in the works for 7 years or whatever. They keep restarting and going back because they find new time saves.
Absolutely unreal. It's pretty cool. I know that I think you video edit for Cosmic as well. So you're like into the content creation space, and I'm curious, like what's of the process, even nowadays, what part do you find like the most rewarding, or what part do you enjoy the most of all this?
Probably clicking upload. It's the best part. I'd say the most rewarding is aside from obviously the release, when like everyone's watching it, and it's always a pretty crazy day when I release a video. But within the process, the best for me is coming up with an idea for a really cool way to visualize something that's really clear and that's really like looks great, and then pulling it off exactly the way I want it, and it looks great and I love it. That's like when I've done that, when I like push myself to learn something new, to like try something in After Effects that I've never done before, and then it takes me a couple hours to figure it out, but then the result looks amazing. It's really probably the most satisfying one.
So cool. I excuse me. It always fascinates me what part, because to make any of the videos I've watched that you've made, Speedrun Explained or the history ofs, there's so many aspects to it, and I'm glad to hear how much time you've spent writing it, because like I said, the info is always great, the voiceover is always great, everything is edited so tightly and so well, and but all those are different skill sets. If I live about a half an hour away from Hollywood, and all those have their own individual job when you go work in entertainment and stuff like that. So the fact that you have to do all those, you have to kind of become proficient at all of them. It's pretty fascinating, and that's probably why it takes so long to produce a video. At this point, what's the longest one? What's been the video that's taken you the longest to create? Just curious.
I think that might. I guess it depends how you want to count it. In terms of hours worked on it, I'm pretty sure it's still Zelda 1. Because the run is 27 minutes, and the video is an hour and 9, so it's roughly about 45 minutes of editing, which is close to on par with the longest videos I've made. So that was already one of the longest, but also during the run itself, there's all the info I decided to add on screen that makes it easier to understand what he's doing, where he's going, and why he's doing it. But I had to do that all by hand because it's not like an emulator run where you can just hook up the task file, and
Yeah.
then pull up the RAM viewer and whatever, extract the data, and then
Right.
like I do that for like a lot of NES games, thanks to IsoFreeze showing me the way. He has a tutorial to import data from emulators into After Effects, but you can't do that with an NES run. So I had to manually, every screen transition, every enemy killed, everything LAC does, I had to update my info on screen for the entire run. And so
Jeez.
just that thing took me probably a week and a half
Oh,
just to go through the entire run, and then just that I basically created a sequence from there, and then I would use that sequence as the run with like within the rest of the editing. So that was probably the longest. But in terms of like total time from when I started working on it to when I finished it, that has to be the Ocarina of Time round warp
mm,
videos. It's in two parts, but together they make up about 40 minutes.
yeah.
That actually started as a speedrun explained of OOT any percent, but few things happened, sort of fell out. Basically, Torjay wanted to also to do the same thing himself for his own run, and so he sort of like wanted to back out of the project. And so I had like a script that I had to scrap and converted it basically into explaining wrong warp instead of any percent. Um, and I was helped by MZX Rules, who is extremely knowledgeable. He's a really great guy. He's one of the best minds in the OOT speedrunning. He's just not necessarily the best at communicating that knowledge, and so sometimes we had trouble like understanding each other. I had a lot of trouble understanding what he was explaining because the subject was also really complex, and I was running into like motivation issues with
Mm,
like the channel views were a little lower in that period. The the subject was really difficult. I had to turn around, scrap the script, and everything. Like the process was really long, and eventually, like I sort of set it aside while I was working on other videos. So from when I started working on it to when I published part two, I think it was over a year between those two moments. And just the moment when I was working on parts one and two, those video took me months because I had really a lot of trouble like getting into the editing and getting the work done because it was tedious and difficult, and I hadn't like to have my brain in the right space, and it was never there, and I was moving between homes and searching for apartments, and
oh man.
basically everything
Yeah.
was together to just make it horrible. So that was definitely the worst one to make so far. Hopefully the worst one ever.
You touched on something that I know a lot of folks, in our community end up, we sometimes like to edit our own content, things like that. I've done some editing for Mitch and others, and the editing process is at times can be a really creative process, and being in a good headspace for that, or at least a creative headspace can be really important. So I can only imagine having to struggle with real life stuff, all these other things going on. It's not conducive to, producing something like that, especially of the quality I'm sure you want to put out there. So I'm glad you mentioned the grind a little bit because that can be a real thing.
Yeah, and it's actually something that the past 2 weeks I've had trouble with. I had I've been making like production schedules now to try to like have an idea of how long things will take me and whatever.
Sure.
And I had to scrap my schedule because I was 2 weeks behind and I just wasn't getting any work done.
Right.
And at some point when I'm in that state, I just have to give up. I'm like,
Right.
okay, I'm just not I'm okay with not working right now. Just do other
Yeah.
things, work on a randomizer,
Right.
play games,
Clear the head.
relax. It's fine. And then when it comes back it comes back. Because it there's nothing worse than feeling guilty about not being productive and just still not being productive and not doing anything that's fun or that's interesting or that's anything. So you're just like refreshing Twitter, refreshing Facebook, that's even worse, refreshing Reddit, going on YouTube, watching things that you don't care about,
Right.
or
Completely mindless.
looking at your empty following list on Twitch and like, oh, maybe now there's someone streaming. Nope, nothing. Still reruns of reruns of GSA or whatever. Uh, so yeah, when I'm at that space, that's the worst, and it's one of the disadvantages of working completely alone with no deadlines, no one to report to, nothing. And also being in the same space for work as for leisure, entertainment. I
Yeah.
have one computer, I do my work on it, and I do my gaming on it. And so that is always a challenge, and it's always a tough balance. And as much as I love doing what I do for a living, and as much as I feel thankful for being able to do that as a living, and it's really, really rewarding, fulfilling. It's a lot of fun. I'm talking about video games. It's really great. There are still aspects to it that are a lot more difficult than I anticipated when I started doing it. Because when I started doing it, doing that was the sort of escape, was the thing that
Oh,
I was
interesting.
doing to not, you know, do whatever other thing I was supposed to be doing. Not that I really had things that I was supposed to be doing because I wasn't like in school or anything, but still, like it was like the hobby. It was the thing that was captivating me to, you know. But when it becomes the main thing, when it becomes your full time gig, then you start you start having other things that you put on top to like not do what you're supposed to be doing, which is the fun work. So yeah, it's a challenge, but I go through cycles of working 20 hours a week and then working 70 hours a week. It just goes back and forth. Usually, the closer I am to releasing a video, the more I work.
That's I'm glad you mentioned it because I think especially during pandemic time a lot of people were actually working from home, and now many people have gone back and stuff, but that idea of your workspace being the same as your leisure space can really blur things, and that becomes real quick. I remember when I was doing content creation full time, I got some really great advice, and I know it sounds so simple, but I was like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like at 5 p.m. or whatever, just get up, whatever you're doing, get up, get out of the space, and force yourself into taking your brain off something. Now the problem is creatively when you're doing something and you're locked in, you don't want to when it's good, you want to keep going, but it really there are things anybody and people find different things for themselves and stuff like that, but and it's always an ongoing process finding what works for you. So super interesting.
Yeah, for me, scheduling it into a production schedule with like
Yeah,
a
there you
section
go.
of the video that I'm recording and a section of the video that I'm editing. Like this is what I'm doing today. When I'm actually like following it, it's great. And when I'm able to actually get ahead of schedule, it's even better. And now I get like super motivated, and that's one thing that's really good at keeping me on track. But it's not perfect. It
Right.
failed 2 weeks ago, and it had its up and downs. But overall, it's been a good addition to my workflow.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. That's great, and I'm glad you're finding what works for you. But as you mentioned, it's an ongoing process. It's not foolproof.
Mhm.
So, you mentioned something too that I think is actually great to lead into this last little thing I'd love to talk to you about, and that is refreshing the social media and everything. There, for those of us that are on Twitter, a lot of times Twitter just can make you feel bad and all those kind of things. But quite often, I find some and it seems it depends on when it is, but there can be some really interesting conversation in the speedrunning community. And got to be honest that you have sometimes sparked some of that conversation, and you did so recently when you posted which what I thought was just a fascinating question and things I have thought about before and haven't been able to figure out how to tackle it. And you very succinctly and it was such a simple tweet is speedrunning dying? And I'm curious, first of all, what gave you the thought to ask the question, because it definitely sparked a nerve with our community.
Mhm. Well, it's something that I've heard for years, and I started really interacting more with the community around 2012, and I think the first time I really saw it like in action, like a lot of it, was at AGDQ 2014. There were a lot of people saying, "Oh, AGDQ is dead. AGDQ is ruined. It used to be so fun. It used to be like 20, 30 people in just that room having fun gaming together. You could see the chemistry between people. You could see like people meeting each other throughout the week and getting friends and everyone getting acquainted. It was great. Now it's like 500 people. It's a hotel. It's so corporate. It's so bland and boring. HDQ is dead. Speedrunning is dead. You saw that a lot in 2014, 2015. They were like, oh, 2013 was the last good HDQ. 2014 was the last good HDQ. 2015 was the last time they had fun in there. It
Never
was
failed.
happening every year.
Yeah.
And a lot of people back then were people from the mid 2000s when like speedrunning for them was IRC chats. It was, people were working on their run for months and then revealing their speedrun by submitting it to SDA. It was a really different approach. Nowadays, it's a lot more about the process and the live streaming on Twitch of the attempts than working on a speedrun on your own, like all by yourself, and then giving like a finished product. So a lot of people didn't recognize speedrunning anymore, and they thought it was dead. But really, what was happening is that it was evolving in a direction that they didn't like and they weren't used to, and they saw that as the way they knew speedrunning no longer was really, uh, uh, not present, but actual anymore. And so uh, that's their interpretation was that speedrunning as they knew it was dead. So I've seen that for years, and it's always been something that's annoyed me because it's like, no, it's clearly not dead. You're just old school. And over the years, I've met a lot of people who came and went, and I also came and went. I mean, I haven't really been seriously running for at least 4 years now. I did some on the side speedruns here and there, but I haven't really done like attempts of a specific run for like multiple days and weeks
Yeah.
since 2017 or 2018. So I consider myself basically a retired speedrunner at this point. So a lot of people, when they sort of like move on from that stage of like doing a lot of runs and practice and competing, uh, they sort of equate that with the hobby itself dying. But what really is happening is just it's evolving in a direction, you're evolving in another, and you just move slowly away. And then everyone that you know is people that were there or joined shortly after you did. Because when it was all fresh and new, you meet a lot of new people, but then you have your circle of friends, you have your following list on Twitch. When you log into Twitch, you see like 8 streams, you choose 1 or 2,
Right.
hang out in chat. You don't really meet new people anymore for a while. And then all the people you met, all the people who were really cool and fresh and new when you started, well, they also end up growing older, doing other stuff, moving on, slowly retiring, and then you don't really see them anymore. And nowadays you log into your Twitch, you see your following list, it's pretty empty. There's only reruns and 1 or 2 streams you're no longer interested in, but you don't really want to unfollow. And at that point you're like, well, speedrunning is dead. No one has any interest anymore. And then when you see things about speedrunning, it's about like this mobile game, and you're like, "Oof, what is that? What bunch of 12-year-olds speedrunning this game? They think that is speedrunning. That is not speedrunning. Speedrunning is suffering. It's pain. It's playing all alone, ocarina of time, figuring out glitches for the first time.
Yeah.
That is speedrunning. It's not what it is right now." And so the sentiment like is still pervasive to this day. A lot of people nowadays, it's people who joined right around when GDQ was like getting big, 2014,
Right.
2015, 2016, when like the golden era of speedrunning on Twitch, when speedrun.com was created, like the really big boom that speedrunning experienced. A lot of people joined then, but no, those people joined 6, 7, 8 years ago. They're the people who started moving on in recent years, and now they look back at the hobby and they see none of their friends, they see
Yeah.
none of the things they knew, and they're like, speedrunning is dead. And so it's still happening. It's just an endless cycle of people coming in and out.
Yeah. There's
And it was just sparked by one Discord chat I'm in with a bunch of people who are from my time,
Yeah.
2012 to 2016 or so. And so most of them are sort of retired now, and they're like, HDQ isn't what it used to be. Speedrunning isn't what it used to be. It's pretty dead at that point. And I was like, no, it's not dead. You're dead. You moved on, you're past it, and you think it's dead, but it really isn't. And then I said that, and I was like, I think that's a really good train of thought that I need to like put together and tweet about it. And it really resonated with a bunch of people.
There's a couple things there that I think are so interesting and really are the points that I think I had thought about but wasn't able to articulate, and one of them being is that we are getting older. I just turned 40 this year, and so I started watching speedrunning when I was 30, I don't know, 10 years ago, something like that. And it's, as you get older, things in your life change. Nobody stays the same. I mean, people get families, people take different career paths. Some people do the speedrunning thing full time. And like, that's an actual career you can take nowadays, or create content, things like that. And I thought that was interesting that sometimes it's tough to acknowledge some of those things, or at least be able to understand that that's what's happening, and that maybe your interests go, and that's okay, right? That your interests go a different way. I was volunteering and working at GDQ this year, and to your point, I feel like speedrunning couldn't be any bigger. And I know that I shouldn't say bigger. It's just evolving. Like, I know some of the numbers on average viewers or whatever may not be the same, but the new games and the new people who are creating new things, we already have 20 years of history or whatever of people learning to play games and to beat them in certain ways. And the next generation has picked up on those things. They already have them in their bag of tools. They don't have to go create stuff. They do have to create stuff. I'm sorry, but they can take the next step. That's what I'm saying, is that they can evolve. And I think you really articulated that as well. And I think that's what's kind of keeping me endlessly fascinated, because I was surprised at the amount of people who were in their 20s and maybe even a little bit younger who are taking on this like next generation of speedrunning, if you will. Like you pointed out the numbers on SRC, and like it keeps growing. It's not getting any smaller.
Yeah. Have you seen the number of views that Minecraft speedruns get since like 2020? It's incredible. It's like millions.
I totally agree. And that's such a good point, because I teach high school students. That's 3 years ago, I went and got a full-time job teaching high school students. And the fact that they even know what the word speedrun is and means, and like, you don't have to go, I don't have to go send them to a Bismuth video, although I will, don't worry. But like, that tells you something that I wouldn't say we're mainstream or anything like that, but there is an understanding a little bit of, okay, people can beat Super Mario Brothers 1 like at incredible speeds that were kind of unheard of, and I think that's really telling that there is very much so the community is just growing. It's evolving. I wouldn't even say growing. Evolving, I think, is the best way to put it. So anything, was there, in the responses and the comments that you saw, was there anything that was surprising, or maybe that gave you a perspective that you hadn't considered?
That's a good question. I don't really have an example I remember, but what I did see and notice is that a lot of names that I knew from 2012, 2013 was like, yep, that's exactly me. Like Poodle Skirt, that's a name I hadn't heard in years. Old OOT runner who was like really good at like all dungeons and whatever in like 2013. Or even people from the mid 2000s who said when he's talking about in 2015 where people said AGDQ was dying, like I was one of those people. I was one of those people who was speedrunning in the mid 2000s, and by 2015 I felt it was dead. So yeah, I was mostly like seeing a lot of people who joined around the same time I did, who felt exactly the same way as like, that tweet is speaking to me personally.
There's also one other interesting aspect, is that especially if the games I speedrun are typically have something to do with nostalgia, and it's always tough to separate if something I remember being awesome was actually awesome, or is it just the nostalgia of playing with friends, playing with my brothers, playing those kind of things.
Or and if I always because it was one of the 3 games you had,
right? Or and nostalgia goes can be experiences as well. Like I still I'm never going to forget the first GDQ I attended live, and that's because it's how your Minecraft run. It's like these things you can't see them without that perspective. That plays a part, I think, as well. So
yeah, I remember one of one of the main highlights for me in 2014 was meeting a lot of people who, in my mind, were legendary.
Right.
So, like Brian Bosshart, who was like one of the top GoldenEye players for of the mid 2000s. He was like, to me, he was like a legendary gamer, and I was like starstruck meeting him the first time. Or like ZFG or Andrew G or a lot of these people that I had known. Well, ZFG not for years, but Andrew G I had known his speedruns since like 2007, and so it was like that is still very memorable to me. Like meeting people that I viewed as absolutely legendary people in the speedrunning world. It's definitely like things that stick with you. Even like nowadays, when I go to a GDQ, it's been a long while since I've been impressed with meeting anyone in the speedrunning community. But like back then, it was just a completely
Yeah,
different thing.
and there's nothing that can change that experience, right? Like that's the experience you had, and like there's this, it's tough. It's so tough. I will also add to that it's my respect level for the folks who like Mitch, ZFG, folks who are still grinding these games a decade or longer later. It's not. I can't imagine the thought or the dedication, like how you can keep yourself so focused on something like that. It's kind of unreal. Like my respect level for them has gone up as I've gotten older, and I find other interests and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, in the tweets, I say that the longest I know in speedrunning careers is 14 years, and that is ZFG, because he started in 2007,
blows my
and
mind.
he hasn't really been active in speedrunning since 2021 was when he was doing the latest Metroid, and in OOT it's like early 2021 when he was last doing 100%. Now he's playing randomizer. He's streaming a bit less. So as of right now, it's been like about a year. I would say ZFG right now looks like he's about at that point too.
Yeah.
So it happens to everyone, even the most eternal runner that I know.
The great thing about that though is it doesn't take away from our experiences. Like it doesn't take away from me having those moments watching you play Mario Maker on the GDQ stage in 2016 or whatever. And it's okay to have those memories. That's the kind of the way I feel about it. Like I think that's the kind of the moral of the story, that it's okay that we move on. It's like that. It's not going to be the end. And speedrunning is not going away. There's going to be other folks who are going to come in and keep doing it. As we saw at GDQ this year, there was a lot of new runners and a lot of people who, they're not playing Mario 1 to say the least. So. Well, super interesting stuff, and I'm glad you tweeted, and I'm glad it resonated with people, because I had the thoughts myself, and I'm curious for you. It's an interesting point to bring this up. What's next for you? I assume full-time content stuff at this point.
Yeah. What's next? Right now I'm working on finishing up the Super Mario 64 ABC History series. It's taken longer than I expected. I knew it was a huge undertaking. I still underestimated it, but I'm about to be done in about a month and a half. I will be finished with that series. After that, I definitely plan on going back to Speedrun Explained content.
Cool.
So taking Speedrun, explaining it, either world record or tasks. I'm still not fully decided on what games I want to approach, but I have a few ideas. I have a few, like at least 2-3 games that I probably gonna do in the next like 6 to 8 months. But yeah, it's basically whenever I finish a video, I'm like, all right, well, that's the next one, and
what's next?
That's just how I approach it. And yeah, in terms of speedrunning, I'm always like, oh, I should relearn this route. I should like do this, and I just never do it. But I've been meaning to. I've been meaning to redo a bit of SM64. I used to run 16 and 70 star, just like trying to improve my PB a bit.
Yeah.
I've never been like really good. My 16 star is like 2037, so probably like 800th by now. But yeah, there are a few speedruns that I'm always like, I should do it again. Like every now and then I go back to no levels early in DK64.
Yeah.
I do like super rusty runs that are like 2 minutes slower than my PB with a route that's like 15 minutes faster. And I'm like, I just next run I'm gonna beat my PB, and then I just don't do it for another 6 months until the next NLE tournament comes up. And then I join the tournament. I'm like, I'm gonna practice this time, and then I don't practice. I join the first race. I get a terrible time. I get knocked out first round. And I'm like, oh, I just lost to someone with a PB 20 minutes slower than me. So yeah, in terms of speedrunning, I never want to say that I'm done, but
Right.
I never quite come back the way I want to. But maybe in the future, I'm gonna find a speedrun I want to do and just do it for a while. But yeah, it's mostly been YouTube stuff now. My Twitch has never been like a huge thing anyway.
Sure.
The most I got was maybe 40 average viewers when I was doing regular 101% speedruns. So I'm really just focusing on YouTube now, and yeah, it's just more good videos. Hopefully, good videos.
No, I'm glad you keep producing stuff. It's there are a couple of folks who I will watch almost always when it comes at you. Somebody basically all this the speed running content stuff, and I'm always excited when something when I see a new release in my feed that comes up. I'm like, yes, yay, speedrunning content. So thanks so much for taking that. It's been really fun. I really enjoy having folks on who have been doing this for a while, and just to have some perspective on that, because as that tweet hit the nerve, there's always just this constant evolution of the community and things like that. So I appreciate you providing some perspective on some history and your own running and content creation and all that kind of stuff. It's been an absolute pleasure. If people do, I mean, at this point, I'm sure most people know, but where can people find your stuff and find you on the internet if they want to?
If you type in Bismuth and you see bananas, that's the right channel.
And if you can watch you place bananas still. You're still working on the randomizer, so you can on your Twitch channel.
Yeah. So yeah, basically Bismuth on Twitch, Bismuth on YouTube, Bismuth 9 on Twitch, and yeah, recently my latest video is quite different from what I've usually been doing. It's a presentation I gave in Munich in July about. Basically, the idea is that speedrunning it has many scientific elements, and we could have spent the entire hour talking about that. But essentially, I break down what tassing is and what glitch hunting is, and how it pertains to scientific elements, either through the scientific method or just like using a lot of science notions like math and computer science and whatnot. And the response was really great. A lot of people really loved it, and it was a really good like recognition for the work we do as speedrunners. Like it's a hobby, but there's still a lot of like research and a lot of like thought and effort put into it. And people with PhDs in AI and technology and computer science were really fascinated by it and invited me to give the talk. So yeah, I was really, really glad for that opportunity. But yeah, otherwise the rest of my channel is going to be just me talking for 45 minutes about Mario entering parallel universes.
Don't let that sell you short, folks. It's absolutely worth it, okay? If you haven't seen it yet. So anyway, Bismuth, thanks so much for hanging out and sharing. I really do appreciate it, and can't wait to see the next one. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. If you're enjoying the podcast, please feel free, subscribe, like, leave a comment, all that stuff people say at the end of a video. It honestly all goes a long way to help the podcast. Thank you so much. If you want to join us on Discord, we chat mostly about food, but occasionally we do talk about the stuff that's in the podcast. The link is in the show notes or in the description. Feel free. Come on by, join us. If you want to follow on Twitter, Sequence Break PC. Sequence Break PC. I post when I go live. It's kind of not at a set time, so if you want to see the live feed of the podcast, feel free, follow there. And finally, if you want to email, podcast@sequencebreakpodcast.com. Sequencebreakpodcast.com is also where you can find the backlog of all of the episodes. It's also on YouTube as well, so feel free, join in, have some fun. Thank you so much. I will see ya in the next one.